Good afternoon, children. This is Grandma Carla, and I have a very special young man with me. This is Michael, and he is my grandson, and we're going to read Curious George. Curious George takes a job. Are you ready to read a story?
Yeah.
Curious George takes a job. This is George. He lived in the zoo. He was a good little monkey and always very curious. He wanted to find out what was going on outside the zoo. Do you want us to show the pictures? See the picture of Curious George? See the picture, Michael? Look at the picture. Oh, you're too interested in looking at Grandma? One day, when the keeper was not paying attention, George got hold of the key for the cage. When the keeper discovered what had happened, it was too late. George was gone. See the pictures? You see the pictures? Oh. You see the pictures? Where was George? They looked for him everywhere, but they could not find him. Where is George? Where's George, Michael? George was hiding in the hay of his friend, the elephant. Finally, the keepers gave up looking for him. George found a nice cozy spot to sleep under the elephant's right ear. And the next morning, before the zoo opened, he got away safely. You see the pictures? Yeah. What do you see you? You see you in that picture? There's the elephant friend. Do you see George hiding? Do you see George hiding?
Michael, where's George? Can you see?
Do you see George hiding? See George? Once in the street, George felt a little scared. What should he do in the big city? Maybe he could find his friend, the man with the yellow hat, who had brought him over from Africa a long time ago. Only George did not know where he lived. There was a bus stopping at the corner. George had never ridden on one. Quickly he climbed a lamppost, jumped on top of the bus, and off they went.
Did you see the bus?
See, George doesn't know which way to go or what to do. And then he sees a bus. Do you see George on top of the bus? Where's George?
Can you point to George?
Can you find George? You found George, Nathan. Good job. Now they were right in the center of town. There was so much to see that George did not know where to look first. If only he could go on riding like this forever. Michael, can you find George?
Right there.
Right there? Do you see George?
Can you point to George?
Very good. Let's show the picture of George. Can you find George? There he is, on top of the bus. But after a while, George got tired and a little dizzy. When the bus slowed down to turn into a side street, George jumped off. Did you jump on the trampoline? Did you like jumping on the trampoline? Like George? Jump! There was a restaurant right in front of him. Something smelled good. Suddenly, George felt very hungry. The kitchen door stood open and George walked in. On the table was a big pot. Of course, George was curious. He had to find out what was in it. See the pictures? There's George going in the restaurant. And there's the big pot. And George peeking into it. When the cook came back, he had a big surprise. Spaghetti was all over the place. And in the middle of it was a little monkey. George had been eating yards and yards and had wound himself all up in it. The cook was a kind man and did not scold much, but George had to clean up the kitchen and then do all the dishes. My, what a lot of them there were. The cook was watching George. "You are lucky to have 4 hands," he said. "You can do things twice as quickly." Look at that spaghetti all over the kitchen. And George all wrapped up. And there's George having to clean up everything. Oh my.
How much longer is this?
I have a friend who could use a handy little fellow like you to wash windows. If you would like to, I will take you over to him. So they went down into the subway and took an uptown train to the cook's friend, who was an elevator man in a skyscraper. "Sure, I can use you," the elevator man said to George. "I will give you what you need for a job. You can start right away. But remember, you are here for washing windows. Never mind what people inside the house are doing. Don't be curious, or you'll get into trouble." George promised to be good, but little monkeys sometimes forget. All right, let's show. You can go ahead. You're ready to take it.
Oh, he's doing okay. I mean, how is this a long chapter? Or?
I don't know. I haven't even ever looked at it.
Oh, you ready to get done, buddy?
Yeah.
You did a good job.
You did a very good job. All right, let's finish up. Michael had to go, so now we have Nathan here with us. And there is the train, and there's Curious George getting a job for washing the windows. This is Nathan, my grandson. Hi, Nathan. Can you say hi to the camera? Hi. George was ready to start. My, how many windows there were. But George got ahead quickly since he worked with all 4 hands. He jumped from window to window just as he had once jumped from tree to tree in the African jungle. For a while, George stuck to his work and did not pay any attention to the people inside. Of course, he was curious, but he remembered his promise. You see, George? Look how many windows. Look how many windows on that big, big building. Would you like to wash all those windows? In one room, a little boy was crying because he did not want to eat his spinach. George did not even look, but went right on with his work. In another room, a man was taking a nap and snoring. George was sorry it was not his friend, the man with the yellow hat. He listened to the funny noise for a while and then went on working. But what was going on in here? George stopped working and pressed his nose against the window. 2 painters were working inside. George was fascinated. Painting looked like a lot more fun than washing windows. You see the pictures? There's the man snoring. And there are the men painting inside the window that George was watching. The painters were getting ready to go out for lunch. The minute they left, George climbed inside the window. What wonderful paints and brushes they had. George could not resist. What is he going to do, Nathan? Is he going to paint? Is George going to paint? Look at that. The men went out and George came in the window. Uh-oh, George came in the window. An hour later, the painters came back. They opened the door and stood there with their mouths wide open. The whole room had changed into a jungle with palm trees all over. The walls and a giraffe and 2 leopards and a zebra. And a little monkey was busy painting himself on one of the trees. Then the painters knew what had happened. What did George do? Did he paint all the walls? Look, the walls. I think he did a pretty good job. Don't you think he did a pretty good job? Look at all the palm trees. It became a jungle. And he painted himself on the wall. I know. Look what happened. Luckily, George was close to a door. He ran out as fast as he could. After him ran the two painters, then the elevator man, and then the woman who lived in the place. "Oh, my lovely room," cried the woman. "Don't let him get away." George headed for the fire escape. There was George running away, and the men after him, and the woman yelling, "Don't let him get away! Don't let him get away!" Is George in trouble? Do you think George is in trouble? George reached the end of the fire escape. The others had not caught up with him yet. Here was his chance. They could not jump, but George could easily jump down and escape. In a moment, he would be safe. Poor little George. He had forgotten that the pavement was hard as stone, not like the soft grass of the jungle. What did George do? Did he hurt his foot? There's George running down, and he jumps down the fire escape and lands on the hard, hard cement. Poor, curious George. Too bad. The fall broke his leg, and an ambulance came to take George to the hospital. "He got what he deserved," said the woman, "making my apartment into a jungle." "Indeed." "I told him he would get into trouble," the elevator man added. "He was too curious." George had to lie in bed with his leg high up in a plaster cast. He was very unhappy, and it was all started out so nicely. If only he had not been so curious, he could have had a lot of fun. Now it was too late. All right, so here's the pictures of George going in the ambulance and George getting stuck in a plaster cast at the hospital. Oh my goodness. Poor curious George. But the next morning, George's friend, the man with the big yellow hat, was buying his newspaper. Suddenly, he got very excited. "This is George," he shouted when he saw the picture on the front page. Quickly, he read the whole story and then ran to a telephone booth to ring the hospital. "I am George's friend," he said to the nurse who answered the phone. "Please take good care of him so that he will get better quickly. I want to take him to a movie studio and make a picture about his life in the jungle. Don't let him get into any more mischief until I can take him away." Do you see the pictures? See the pictures? Let's show them the picture. Ready? See, there's the picture of George, George's friend, the man in the yellow hat, reading about George in the newspaper. And here's the picture of him calling up the nurse to tell her, "Please take good care of George." Are you worried about George? Uh-huh. Finally, the day came when George could walk again. "Your friend is going to take you away this morning," said the nurse. "Just wait right here for him and don't touch anything." As soon as George was alone, he looked around at all the strange hospital things. "I wonder what is in this big blue bottle," he thought. George was very curious. It smelled funny. Suddenly, his head began to swim. Then he felt as if he were flying. And then rings and stars danced before his eyes. And then everything went dark. What happened to Curious George? Here's a picture of him finally walking again. And the nurse telling him not to get into any mischief. And then there's a picture of George finding a bottle, a blue bottle of ether. And he turned, and he thought he was a flying angel or something, and then he turned around and went to fast asleep, because ether is something that puts you to sleep. Oh my, is George being curious again? And this is how the man with the yellow hat found George when he came to call for him. They picked him up and shook him, but they could not wake him up. He was so fast asleep that finally they had to put him under the shower. How surprised he was when he woke up. Did they put him in the bathtub? Here's George. They're trying to wake him up, but he is fast asleep. And there's his friend, the man with the yellow hat. But George won't wake up. And then they put him under the shower. There he is in the bathtub. You have to put him in the water to wake him up. Not right now, you're right.
I'm gonna sit with
Okay, you come over here and sit with Kira. George said goodbye to the nurse and the kind doctor, and then he and the man with the yellow hat got into the car, drove to the movie studio. In the president's office, George had to sign a contract, and now he was a movie star. Not right now, you're right. And there's the picture of George saying goodbye to all the kind people and getting in the car with the man with the yellow hat. And there is the George signing a contract for the man at the movie studio. In the studio, George was kept so busy all the time that he forgot to be curious. He liked the jungle they made for him, and he played happily there. They made a jungle for George so he would have a place to be in the movie. So it was a movie set jungle, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. And there he was. There's all the people holding the cameras on his little movie set jungle. See? And when the picture was finally finished, George invited all of his friends to see it. The doctor and the nurse and the ambulance driver and the man from the newsstand and the woman and the elevator man and the two painters and the cook and the reporter and all the keepers of the zoo. Now playing Curious George. So all of George's friends came. And look at all the people that were in this story. Even the painters and the lady that he painted her house, and the doctors and the nurses. Everybody came to watch George's movie. Now the lights went out and the picture started. "This is George," the voice began. "He lived in the jungle. He was a good little monkey. He only had one fault. He was too curious." And there's the picture of George's movie and all the people in the movie theater going to see George's movie. And there's a picture of George painting, because he likes to paint. The end. Did you like your story of Curious George?
Yeah.
Did you like it? Did George get all better after he was in the ambulance?
Yeah.
He got all better and he got to be a movie star, didn't he? And is Nathan my friend in this movie?
Mm-hmm.
You're my grandson, aren't you? Can you say goodbye to everybody?
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.